Welcome back to another episode of the All Yellow Jackets podcast. Number 8, I believe. We're on number 8, straight, just barreling down the road. I appreciate anybody that's joining me. This is your host, Jackson Caudell, publisher of allyellowjackets.com, coming to you on Tuesday afternoon, a little bit after the Wake Forest win. We're going to also look ahead to Bowling Green after we recap what was a much-needed, hard-fought win. That was they went very different than I think we may have thought they would have, but at the end of the day, they got the win. That's what matters the most. If you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, let you know when I'm when I've put new content up. It's much appreciated. If you're listening on podcast form, leave a review. Let me know what's good. Let me know what's bad about the show. I'll make the changes. But let's not waste any time. Let's dig right into it. So Saturday was a very big game. We talked about it last week. Big picture perspective, this was about as close to a must win early in the season as it gets. I know a lot of people are, don't want to put that label on a game so early in the season, but you look at the path ahead. Yes, there are games, this Saturday against Bowling Green. There's games that are going to be favored in down the road against Virginia and Boston College. But there's also other tougher games, and if you lost this one, you're 1-3. You go into September with little momentum, and you're going to have to pull off a couple upsets, which are not impossible. I'm not saying they are, but it just makes your job that much tougher. And you want to make everybody wants things to be easier on themselves than they have to be. You don't want to make it harder. So now you get a chance to go into October 3-2. It was announced yesterday the game against Miami is going to be in prime time. That's going to be a huge measuring stick because I know Ole Miss was tough. Miami's going to be the best team they've played up to this point in the season and probably up until they play Clemson. So it's going to be an extremely tough test, but we're going to talk Miami next week. There's no point in talking a lot about Miami right now because there's a game to get to this weekend and there's a game to recap. So let's just dig into the offense first. It was probably the worst offensive game of the season. Second half against Louisville aside, if they didn't hit it, the good thing is they hit explosive plays. That was the main difference between them and Wake Forest. Wake Forest had some nice moments in the second half, but Georgia Tech's defense, we're going to get to them in a second. Like, they played outstanding. We've talked about it on this show for pretty much since the start of the season. The pass rush had to be there. Tackling had to be better. Turnovers had to be forced. You got all that. Tackling was not perfect, especially there were some drives in the second half where, you could definitely nitpick a little bit, but defense finishing with 8 sacks and 5 forced turnovers, that's about as good as you could ask for. If I told you that was going to happen before the game, I think most of you would have picked Georgia Tech to win, and that's what they did. The offense could have made it an even bigger win. They had some struggles in the red zone. So, you look at some of the numbers a little bit. Haynes King, let's see here. 16 of 27, 222 yards, 2 touchdowns. I thought in this game, from his perspective, there was the drive he threw the interception on. He was forcing a lot more throws downfield, and I like it when he throws downfield. Every offense needs to throw the ball downfield. He was just making some poor decisions. That was the first time I think I've maybe all season really seen him make poor decisions. The first interception of the year against Louisville was not really his fault. It was a tip pass. This one was his fault. He was really forcing the issue going to Eric Singleton a couple times deep, and both times went in double coverage. The first time he was lucky not to be picked off. The second time he was picked off. But again, Haynes has not been making mistakes really all season, and that was really the only bad one in this game. He used his legs effectively as well, carrying it 6 times for 53 yards. I don't mind that number. Like, I like to keep it 6 or 7. I don't want a lot more than that. I think a lot of the times, Key actually talked about this in his press conference today. He doesn't want to use a lot of design runs for Haynes King, and that's the way I prefer to keep it. I like him using and improvising. He did that a few times. He got a touchdown run against Ole Miss last week. He's really good at making decisions whenever they're running RPOs and pulling it around the corner or anything like that. He needs to do it, I think, more often sometimes. Like, I think there are some times where there's an open lane, but when he does pull it, he's very effective. The passing game, I thought, was the best part of the offense. Eric Singleton had another big game. We saw Abdul get his first touchdown catch as a Yellow Jacket. And the running game was largely ineffective until the fourth quarter. Jamal Haynes, 18 for 98. Trey Cooley did not have usually we're used to seeing an explosive Trey Cooley run in a game. 7 carries for 17 yards. Definitely not his best performance. Those were the main 2 ball carriers. Dante Smith's been a little bit banged up. I think Key said he's ready to go. I'm sure we'll see him this week against Bowling Green. But aside from Jamal Haynes' touchdown run near the end of the game when it was 23-16 and that Tech was looking to just ice the clock, running game was just largely, ineffective. And that's not the way that they want it. When you carry the ball for 32 times, you want to get more than 158 yards and average more than 4.9 yards per carry. They did lose some yards rushing as well. And not a terrible game. It's not like they went out there, carried it 30 times for 60-something yards and just couldn't get anything going. Like there was some explosives in there, especially on that last drive, but just need to see more consistency. And I think they didn't run it as good as I thought they did against Ole Miss, or at least early in the game against Ole Miss. But offensive line, fantastic, especially from a pass blocking perspective. You go look at the numbers on PFF, they're outstanding. Ethan McKinney had a very good grade pass blocking. Jordan Williams was injured at the beginning of the game. Ja'Kai Leftwich come in and played pretty well. I think the pass blocking as a whole was very good along the interior on the tackles, but I do think that was a big key coming into the game. We talked about the Wake Forest pass rush from guys like Jacob Roberts, who still leads the nation in sacks. I know he leads the ACC. He still has 5. They kept Haynes King clean all game. Now, that was one of the big keys to the game that we talked about. Now, Wake Forest numbers are inflated a little bit because they had 10 sacks against Old Dominion. But that they're a pretty good defensive line. I don't know that they're a top 3 in the ACC or anything, but I do think that they're a pretty good defensive line. And the fact that consistently through 4 games that they have been able to keep Haynes clean in the pocket, that's allowed him to be effective through the air. There's a reason he is second in the ACC in passing yards and has been one of the top quarterbacks in the conference and pretty much the country so far. A lot of that has to do with the pass protection. They did a great job this past week. Need to do it again this week, and then you're going to get a big test against Miami. Miami's probably got some NFL dudes on that defensive front. It's probably going to be the most athletic that Tech has seen up to this point in the season, but not going to get into a ton of Miami talk right now. But the main issue with the offense was the red zone. And this has been kind of an issue for the past 2 weeks. We talked about it against Ole Miss. They had some chances, whether it was some scoring opportunities where you had the field goal blocked, you had the drop in the end zone, and they couldn't punch it in. You had it this week, but the good thing is Aiden Burr had the special teams had its best overall game of the season, and it came at a good time. Special teams and defense have been probably the 2 biggest issues for Georgia Tech all season. And guess what? That's what won you the game this past Saturday. So now it's just about stacking those performances on top of each other, because I think most Tech fans would agree with me. They're comfortable with how the offense is playing and going in week to week. They're not scared. Well, the offense, it could collapse at any point. No, I think we're saying that this is a pretty good offense overall, and you expect to see good performances every week. That doesn't mean you're going to get an A+ every week, like we just saw. This was their worst performance of the season, and they put up 30 points and won a football game on the road. So, very good game all around. But the main issue was the red zone. That they kept getting themselves into 2nd and 3rd and longs. I asked Key about it after the game, and he said that's what he thought was the main issue when they got into the red zone. When you put yourself in those situations, and it becomes obviously I'm not an X's and O expert. Everybody knows this. The field shrinks when you get inside the red zone. That makes play calling a lot tougher. And when you put yourself in 2nd and 3rd and long, all you're doing is making it 100 times harder on yourself. And Wake is not even close to the best defense that Tech's going to face all year, but they're good enough to where they're going to make you pay for those mistakes. So what we need to see from them going into this week and going into the Miami game, they have to stay ahead of the chains, especially in the red zone, and they have to execute better in the red zone, because yes, field goals are nice, but field goals will lose you games a lot of times. When they play better competition, whether it's Miami, North Carolina, Clemson, Georgia, they have to cash in on those red zone opportunities. So that's the main thing I want to see from the offense going forward, because look, if they do that, they score 40 points against Wake Forest on Saturday. Like that was the most disappointing thing I think from the whole game was just how they executed in the red zone. And they had good field position. You had the muff punt, the Wake Forest shanked a punt, and they started on like the 38-yard line, I believe, and I think settled for a field goal. Like there are just different times where they have to get in the red zone, and that it's you don't want to see it become a week-to-week thing, but that's 2 straight weeks where we've seen issues in the red zone. So in terms of offensive play, that's what I want to see get cleaned up the most. But the explosive plays and responding well, they did. Like, they started the game with a 3-and-out, and that was not obviously not the way you want to start any game. Wake Forest goes down and kicks a field goal. What do? Just a couple plays later, 6 plays later to be exact, Georgia Tech scores. Eric Singleton with a great 31-yard catch. That, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the best throw from Haynes King this season? I think it might be. Like that was a pretty dang good throw. And it was just a great response there early in the game. You keep going down. Wake Forest, there was a lot of times Wake Forest was threatening, and that they really executed poorly on a couple of 4th down plays. And I thought a lot of that had to do with the defensive pressure, and we're going to get into the defense in just a second. So the ability to hit explosives when they needed to, it's a cliche in football, but the most explosive team is going to win more oftentimes than not, as long as you keep the turnovers down, which Tech has done. They were the most explosive offense in this game. They didn't turn the ball over. So red zone issues aside, it's a win. So I thought, if I had to give an MVP to the offense for this game, I think it would probably be the offensive line, just for how clean they kept Haynes for most of the game. Again, I said the run blocking struggled a little bit. The running game failed to spring open, but it was allowed King to spread the ball around to his different receivers. Singleton had another good performance. Abdul caught his first touchdown. They spread the ball around, but I think the offensive line would win MVP for this performance. So let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. I'm excited to talk about the defense. It's the first time I've been excited to talk about this defense all year. And I'm going to start off by saying how Kyle Kennard did not get either ACC Defensive Lineman of the Week, ACC Defense Player of the Week, recognized nationally. You have 4 sacks. Look, I get he had some penalties that were harmful. Yeah, I just, 4 sacks is 4 sacks. Like that. He is now top 5 in the ACC in sacks, and he's had that one pretty good game. And this was something we talked about. Last week. Wake Forest was near the bottom of the ACC in sacks allowed. They had allowed 10 coming into that game. Well, now it's 18 because they gave up nearly that exact number to Tech. Kyle Kennard led the way with 4 sacks. I thought, they started blitzing early on. KJ Wallace got a sack. Paul Moala got a sack. Andre White got a sack. Andre White was pretty good. I think he only played like 13 snaps. He played really well. I'm interested to see if he's if the coaching staff feels he's earned more reps. But I thought he was one of the many bright spots on that defense. But I thought the defensive line as a whole, look, we could look back at this and say Wake Forest was just a terrible offensive line. That could be the case because this is by far the best performance that the defensive line for Georgia Tech has had. But I do think you have to give credit where it's due. And, I thought Zeke Biggers, I thought he had his best game of the year by far. He was very forceful inside. Micaiah Scott, he was moving inside and out. That they tried some different looks and got him on the outside, and I really thought it helped with the run defense as well. But he played a pretty good game. And then just the secondary, I thought, Jalen King had 2 interceptions. There were some – let me take a moment to talk about some of the bad pass interference penalties. Like, there were quite a few. Like, look, I'm not a guy that's going to complain about the refs all the time. Like, if you commit penalties, like 14 penalties is 14 penalties. That's too much. That some of the pass interference calls were garbage. Like, and they responded well to them. This Wake Forest receiving core we talked about last week, like there are 3 or 4 guys in there that are very good, and Wake has done I would argue as good a job as any in the ACC over the past few seasons at developing wide receiver talent and putting it in the NFL. And they got guys like Taylor Moore, and he made some plays in this game. Jamal Banks, he's had a very good season. He didn't have the biggest impact on this past Saturday, but it's a very good receiving core, and Tech largely held him in check. Some of that I think is the quarterback play for Wake Forest was very up and down. but just overall, they kept what I think is going to wind up being a pretty good offense and limiting them. Like, Wake Forest ran for 224 yards. They also ran the ball 52 times. Like, they only averaged 4.3 yards a carry. Now, do you want that to be lower? Sure. But if a team's just going to run, it's like when you play a triple option team and, if they have 300 yards rushing on you, okay, 300 yards rushing in a vacuum is bad, but also they run the ball every play. So you have to take into account the amount of attempts they had, and that clearly was Wake Forest plan. And frankly, I don't blame them. After if anybody watched the first 3 games of Tech's defense, that was clearly the weakness up to that point. But wasn't perfect. Justice Ellison, I think he finished with nearly 150 yards rushing. Like, it's still you're going to be tested, and Miami runs the ball well in a couple weeks. I'm not the guy that overlooks anybody, but I think Bowling Green is not a high level opponent, and it's going to Tech should win this handily, and you're not going to take I don't know that we're going to be able to take a ton from it. Miami just ran for 300 plus on Temple. Now Temple's terrible, but their offensive line's very good. They have very capable running backs. Like, that's going to be a big test in a couple weeks. So it's the run defense had a solid game. Wasn't a great game, but I think the secondary really should be applauded for how they played. Like, the pass rush obviously is going to get a lot of the headlines, but Kenan Johnson has had his up and down moments while at Georgia Tech. Played a pretty good game Saturday. Like, there was no complaints for me in how he played. He got the game sealing interception that really just put Wake Forest was going to tie that game up, and he really stepped up, made a big play. Miles Sims, he led the team in tackles. Jalen King played really well. I thought Clayton Powell-Lee played pretty well. Just the defense as a whole, it was by far the best game of the year, and it shows up in the advanced stats too. Like, they 12% havoc rate. That's pretty good. It's not elite, but it's pretty good. Run stuff rate, like, again, that's where there's concern. Only 9%. You want to see it a lot higher than that, and that's why there's still some cause for concern. But man, they really shut down the Wake offense, and we'll wind up. We'll see how good the Wake Forest offense is down the road. But I think it's an encouraging performance, especially after the first 3 weeks. And credit where it's due. Andrew Thacker really come up with a pretty good game plan. We talked about this last week. Wake Forest is a really hard offense to plan for. And everybody saw it with the slow mesh points. You're going to see it. They're going to hold it to the last second. Quarterback's going to give them a little boost in the run game, and that he can pull it at the last second, hit guys over the middle. A lot of his passing yards and where Griffiths did damage was on the run. That he made some plays there, but I thought overall defense played a tremendous game. It's just gonna have to be continuing. And I think all the players after the game on Saturday night said that, hey, this is something we can build off of. And, I believe they're going to try to, obviously. You got Bowling Green coming in here this week. If you have a great defense performance there, nobody's going to give you any flowers for that. Again, the big tests are coming this month against Miami and North Carolina. So the defense has got to be ready because both of those teams run the ball really well. So we'll see how much they really have improved, but definitely a good start. So let's go a little bit big picture here and look ahead. Look, this Saturday, Bowling Green, they rank near the bottom of the country in SP Plus rankings. Like, they are a pretty bad football team. They're 1-3. Their only win is against an FCS team in Eastern Illinois. Now, they did play Michigan tough for a half. I know people are going to say that. Let me just tell you, Michigan is, for lack of a better term, playing on cruise control right now. Like, that they look like they are going into every game like they do not care. Like, that they are just waiting to play Penn State and Ohio State and then get on with the rest of their season. Like, that Michigan's obviously a very talented team. They've done that with every single team they've played with this year. Like, they started slow against Rutgers. They screwed around with East Carolina for a little bit. I'm not reading too much into that. Like, I just think that Michigan is playing with their food a little bit. And the other games, like Liberty handled Bowling Green pretty well. Ohio just beat the crap out of them this past week. And Ohio is arguably the best team in the MAC. They have an excellent quarterback in Curtis Rourke, but this is not a high level Group of 5 team. Like, just to be completely honest, like no disrespect or shade thrown anywhere. It is what it is. The main thing you want to see coming in this weekend, and we'll expound more on this later when I do a full game preview. Just handle your business, like in every phase of the game. I want to see the red zone offense. Like, how much better can it be? Like, can they put the ball in the end zone instead of settling for field goals or turnover on downs? Like, they have to be better at that. Can the run game have their best game since South Carolina State? They've tried running it several times, and again, it's not been terrible. Like, it's not like they're going out there averaging 1.7 yards a carry or something stupid like that. But it's it just needs to be better. Like, Jamal Haynes has had a very good season at this point. I think he's tied for third now at ACC in overall yards. Like, that's one thing you look at now. It's refreshing when you go and look at the stats in the ACC and the leaders. There's a Georgia Tech player in nearly every category. Haynes King is second in passing. Jamal Haynes is tied for third in rushing. Kyle Kennard is second or third in sacks now. Like, he's got 4. Jalen King is second or third with interceptions with 2. And I know a lot of this came in one game against Wake Forest, especially for the defense guys. But that's just – it's been a while since you've been able to see that and see guys playing legitimately excellent football at their positions. And now it's just got to carry over from game to game. And that's what this week is for. I want to see the red zone issues get better. I want to see the running attack definitely pick up this week. The offensive line just keep improving. Like, I can't point to a bad performance this year. The pass protection, like I said, has been great. I think King's been sacked 2 or 3 times all year. The run blocking these past 2 weeks have not been great. They've also played 2 pretty decent defensive lines. I think Ole Miss is very good on the defensive line. Wake Forest is solid. Like, they're not a bad this not going to be the worst defensive line you play all year. But it's just one of those things to keep improving on. The receivers, just keep doing what you're doing. I don't really have any complaint about them. Singleton is getting better each game. Malik Rutherford is playing well. Truly no complaints like that. They're not dropping many passes. So defensively, it's just going to be, all right, you had one good performance. Can you carry it over into the next? I want to see the run defense. I just want to see them stuff the run at the line of scrimmage. Like, I want to see them stop the run. No big carries, because that was the few explosive plays that Wake did come in the run game. Like, they bounced some runs outside at the start of the second half. So I just want to see that improve upon. How good can somebody, like, it's great to have Kyle Kennard and the impact that he's had, especially he had a great game against South Carolina State. He had his best performance this past Saturday. All right, can somebody else step up off the edge? Can we get somebody else to create consistent pressure? Because I love it when guys like KJ Wallace, Andre White, and anybody else from that's not a defensive lineman get sacks when they're blitzing. But you also want to be able to get pressure when you have 4. Maybe that's just not what this defense is built for. Maybe they have to blitz more consistently, and it worked Saturday. So I want to see if somebody else off the edge can step up. And Bowling Green has an experienced quarterback. I'm not sure how many of y'all are familiar with Connor Bazelak. If that name does sound familiar, he was at Missouri. He was at Indiana. He's a pretty solid quarterback. Like, he's at Bowling Green for a reason, but he's pretty solid. Like, he's an above average Group of 5 quarterback. I think that's probably what they do well. And he's been up and down this year, but I think he's probably the best player on that offense. Their running attack is okay. And then special teams, again, continue at Aidenburg, 3 for 3. David Shanahan punted the ball. Like, there was absolutely no complaints from me, special team wise. So, big picture, look, we talked about it. This was a win they had to have to try to ensure a trip to a bowl game. And look, there's still a lot of work to be done. Just winning this game alone and getting put on lists by Kirk Herbstreit and all that doesn't mean the job's done yet. Like, there's 4 more wins to go. Have a very good opportunity to get one this week. You still have games against Boston College, Virginia, Syracuse. Still a lot of work to be done. But it is a step in the right direction that they were able to go on the road against a program that has been very consistent from year to year and very well coached. I know Key talked about it constantly this week, how much respect he had for this program. And, frankly, I just, it's hard to disagree with him. That Wake has been one of the more consistent programs in the ACC. And Tech was able to go in there and look, it wasn't the cleanest performance. You wanted to see cashing in opportunities in the red zone and more points off turnovers. 14-point win is a 14-point win on the road against a pretty decent team. So the path is there for to head towards the bowl game, but let's take it. Let's make sure we take it one game at a time, and have a chance to beat Bowling Green this week and head into October with some momentum for the first time in a long time, like the first time in quite a long time. And we'll dig more into the Miami game at this time next week after the Bowling Green game. But a lot to be encouraged about, a lot to be excited about, and it's just let's see what happens this Saturday and the Saturdays beyond. A couple more just other sports news. I know we're in the thick of football season, but look, Tech's volleyball team is we'll get to basketball in just a second, but Tech's volleyball team 11-1 this year. They got a big match against Virginia Tech this week. I think they stayed number 11 in the poll this week, so they're playing very well. If you can, go out and support them. They have done an excellent job this season, and they're a joy to watch week in and week out. Like it's a growing sport, and it's really fun to go out there and watch. I know everybody knows the Nebraska put like 90,000 in the stadium for that. Tech had a great crowd against Georgia a couple weeks ago. It's a very, very good team. Show them your support when you can. I know it's on the road against Virginia Tech this week, but I know that there will be plenty more opportunities for big matches at home. So big shout out to them. They're playing very well this season. And basketball news. So Damon Stoudemire, Nell Fortner had their preseason press conferences today. There'll be more content coming on that on allyellowjackets.com. Be sure to check it out. I would appreciate it if you're able to. Basketball season is getting closer, and the ACC is releasing the schedules tonight for both teams. So be sure to tune in. I think the release is on ACC Network, I believe. It's always eager to see where the games are going to be played. Any games against Duke, Carolina, Miami has had a lot of success over the years. Obviously, the game against Georgia, that's going to be one of the most important games. But both programs, the women's team's looking to bounce back from a bit of a down year, but Fortner's a really good coach. Like, I have no doubt that they're going to bounce back. And then the start of the Stoudemire era is going to be very exciting. Like, I think that team has some nice potential this year, but, we'll have to see it on the court. So just be tuned into that tonight. Keep an eye out. Basketball season, I think it's about a month away. Like, I know or a little more than a month away. I know they've just started practice. ACC Media Days are coming up next month. I'll be there. You'll be getting a ton of content from there. But we will be back Thursday. We always do our preview shows on Thursday. We'll be digging into more Bowling Green, just breaking down what they do, who their star players are, what Tech needs to do to win this game. And then, anything else Georgia Tech-wise that happens, I'm your guy. I'm here to talk about it. So, again, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to let you know when new content comes out. If you're listening on podcast form, would really appreciate a review. If it's 1 star, that's okay. Let me know what I need to do better. If it's 5 stars, that's great. Like I love doing this content, love making doing all things Georgia Tech for you guys. So be sure to go check out the website, allyellowjackets.com. And that's going to do it for me today. Appreciate anybody that listens, and I will see you on